The vast darkness of space stretched endlessly, silent and cold. Among the twinkling stars, a lonely distress signal pulsed weakly, sending out a cry for help. It was old, almost broken, repeating the same message over and over. Most ships ignored it. The signal came from a dead part of the galaxy, a place no one visited anymore. The Galactic Council received the message but quickly dismissed it. No known species lived there. That sector had been abandoned after a great war many centuries ago. Only ruins and wrecked ships remained. To the Council, it was just another ghost signal, an echo of a battle long past. But on the Iron Resolve, a Terran deep space cruiser, Captain Ilias Vance listened carefully. Humans were different from the other species in the galaxy. While others feared the unknown, humans explored it. Where others turned away from danger, humans stepped forward. That was why they were called Deathworlders, beings from a harsh world who refused to back down. Vance stood on the bridge, arms crossed, staring at the holographic display of the weak signal. His crew waited for his decision. "Captain," said Lieutenant Kara Briggs, the ship's tactical officer, "the signal is too weak to track properly. It's been playing on repeat for a long time. Whoever sent it, they might not even be alive anymore." "Maybe," Vance said, his voice calm but firm. "But if there's even a small chance someone needs help, we check it out." Briggs nodded. She had served with Vance for years and knew he wouldn't ignore a distress call, no matter how hopeless it seemed. "Helm," Vance ordered, turning to his pilot, Ensign Work. "Set a course for the signal source. Full speed." "Aye, Captain," Work replied, his fingers flying over the controls. The ship's engines roared to life, and the Iron Resolve changed course, heading toward the unknown. A journey into the graveyard. Hours passed as the ship traveled through the empty sector. The crew remained alert, scanning for signs of danger. The deeper they went, the more wreckage they found. Old, shattered warships floating like the bones of giants. Some were huge, the remains of dreadnoughts from a forgotten war. Others were barely recognizable, torn apart by weapons no one used anymore. "This place gives me the creeps," said Ensign Patel, one of the junior officers. "It's like a graveyard." "It is a graveyard," Briggs replied, "and we're walking right into it." The ship's sensors picked up something new, a faint energy signature coming from one of the wrecks. It was weak but still active. "We found it," said Work. "That must be where the signal's coming from." The crew gathered around the main screen. The damaged ship was barely holding together. Its hull was scarred and pitted from centuries of space debris. The distress beacon still blinked weakly from the wreck's side, struggling to send out its call for help. "Scan for life signs," Vance ordered. A moment later, the results came in. "We have life readings," Briggs confirmed. "Very faint. Whoever's inside, they don't have much time left." Vance made his decision immediately. "Prep a boarding team. We're going into the unknown." The boarding party suited up quickly, their armor sealed against the cold emptiness of space. Vance led the team himself. He was not the kind of captain who gave orders from the safety of his ship while others took the risks. They exited the Iron Resolve in a small shuttle, approaching the damaged vessel carefully. As they got closer, the true state of the ship became clear. It was ancient, a design they had never seen before. "Look at those markings," said Briggs, pointing at strange symbols on the hull. "I don't recognize them. This isn't from any known species." "Then whoever's inside must be the last of their kind," Vance muttered. They docked with the wreck, cutting their way through a sealed hatch. The inside was dark, silent except for the hum of failing life support systems. The air was thin, stale. The team moved carefully, their flashlights sweeping through the narrow corridors. Then they found them. A small group of aliens lay huddled in what seemed to be the control room. Their bodies were frail, their breathing shallow. They had been in stasis for who knew how long, only waking when their emergency systems forced them to. One of them, A tall, thin figure with silver-gray skin and large dark eyes opened their mouth to speak. Their voice was weak, trembling. You are not the ones who destroyed us," they whispered. Vance knelt beside them. "No, we're here to help." The alien closed their eyes in relief. "We are the last of the Velethi. We sent the signal so long ago. We thought no one would come." Vance looked around the ruined ship at the exhausted and broken survivors. Then he spoke, his voice steady and certain. "You called for help. The others ignored you, but we're not like them." His gaze hardened. "We're Deathworlders, and we never turn away from a fight." The interior of the alien ship was cold and dark, its walls covered in dust and ice crystals from the failing life support systems. Captain Elias Vance and his team moved carefully, their flashlights casting long shadows across the broken corridors. The air was thin, filled with the scent of metal and decay. The aliens, who called themselves the Velethi, were barely alive. Their leader, a tall, silver-skinned being named Caloris, struggled to stay conscious. His dark eyes, sunken with exhaustion, met Vance's. "You came," Caloris whispered. "We thought we were alone." Vance nodded. "You sent a distress signal." "We answered." Caloris tried to sit up but winced in pain. His body was too weak. "How long has it been?" Briggs, the tactical officer, scanned the ship's systems. "Their stasis pods have cycled on and off for centuries," she said, frowning. "But the exact date? I can't tell. Their systems are too damaged." "Centuries," Caloris murmured. "Then, it's true. We are the last." His voice held deep sorrow, as if the weight of time had finally crushed him. Vance placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll get you out of here. But first, we need to know what happened." Caloris hesitated, his expression haunted. "The war," he said slowly. "Our people fought against a great enemy, an enemy without mercy. We ran, seeking refuge, but they followed. Our fleet was destroyed, one by one. We were the last ship left." He closed his eyes. "So we hid. We sent out our last call for help, and we waited." Briggs and the other team members exchanged uneasy glances. "What enemy?" Vance asked. Caloris shivered, as if remembering something terrifying. His voice was barely a whisper. "The machines. Something still moves." Before Vance could ask more, his radio crackled. "Captain," came the voice of Ensign Rourke, back on the Iron Resolve. "We have a problem." Vance tapped his communicator. "Go ahead." "We're detecting movement," Rourke said. "Something is shifting in the wreckage around us." Briggs stiffened. "Could just be debris drifting in the gravity field." Rourke hesitated. "I don't think so, sir. Some of the objects, they weren't moving before. Now they are." Vance's instincts screamed danger. "Get the ship ready for immediate evacuation," he ordered. "We're bringing the Velethi aboard." His team moved fast, helping the weak aliens onto stretchers and carrying them back toward the shuttle. As they navigated the ruined corridors, Caloris clutched Vance's arm. His breathing was ragged, his eyes wide with fear. "They're waking up," he whispered. Before Vance could ask what he meant, a deep metallic sound echoed through the ship, a low, mechanical hum. Briggs spun around, weapon raised. "Did you hear that?" The sound grew louder, a rhythmic clicking, like metal scraping against metal. "Move," Vance barked. "Double time." They rushed through the corridors, but behind them, something stirred in the darkness. The sound of shifting metal grew closer. A faint red glow flickered deep in the wreckage. Then something stepped into view. The enemy returns. It was humanoid in shape, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its body made of dark, armored plating. Its head was smooth, featureless, except for two burning red eyes. It moved with an unnatural grace, joints clicking softly. Briggs cursed. "That's not debris." Vance didn't hesitate. Open fire. The corridor flashed with light as the team fired their weapons. Bullets sparked off the creature's armor, but it barely flinched. Then it moved. Fast. It lunged, claws extending from its fingers. Briggs dodged, firing point-blank into its head. This time, the shots worked. The creature's skull shattered in a burst of sparks and black fluid. It collapsed, its limbs twitching. For a second, there was silence. Then Caloris spoke, his voice filled with dread. "You don't understand. That was only one. There are more." As if in response, the ship shook. A deep, thunderous noise rolled through the wreckage. Through the viewport, Vance saw movement in the graveyard of ships outside. Dark shapes unfolded from the debris, red eyes flickering to life. "They were waiting," Caloris whispered. "And now, they have awakened. A desperate escape. Back to the shuttle. Now," Vance shouted. The team sprinted through the ship, carrying the last of the Velethi. More mechanical figures appeared in the corridors, moving with deadly precision. Briggs threw a grenade behind them. The explosion rocked the ship, sending shrapnel flying. It bought them a few extra seconds. They reached the shuttle and sealed the hatch just as a dozen glowing eyes appeared at the far end of the docking bay. The creatures moved forward, claws scraping the floor, but the shuttle's thrusters roared to life, blasting away from the wreck. As they flew back to the Iron Resolve, Vance saw the terrifying truth. The ancient battlefield was no longer lifeless. Hundreds of red eyes blinked awake in the darkness. The machines had been dormant for centuries, waiting. The humans had unknowingly triggered their reactivation. The radio crackled. "Captain," Rourke said urgently, "I don't know what you did over there, but the whole wreck field just lit up like a storm. We've got incoming hostiles." Vance clenched his jaw. They had come to rescue survivors. Instead, they had awakened something ancient and deadly. "Braced for battle," he ordered. "We're not running. If these things are coming back, we'll make sure they regret it." The Iron Resolve turned to face the darkness. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they weren't leaving without a fight. The Iron Resolve shuddered as warning alarms blared across the bridge. The once-dead battlefield was waking up. Hundreds of red glowing eyes flickered to life in the wreckage outside. The machines, silent for centuries, were now moving, assembling, preparing for battle. Captain Elias Vance stood firm, eyes locked on the main display screen. His crew moved quickly, their hands flying over control panels, scanning the incoming threat. Multiple hostile signals approaching fast. Lieutenant Briggs reported, "They're coming from all directions." Vance's expression remained calm, but inside, he knew the truth. This was bad. "Shields up," he ordered. "Charge weapons, and get those Velethi survivors to the med bay." Behind him, Caloris, the leader of the Velethi, sat weakly on a medical stretcher. His silver-gray skin looked paler than before, his breathing still shallow. He watched the screen with fear in his dark eyes. "You should leave," Caloris whispered. "The machines, they never stop. They do not think. They do not fear. They only destroy." Vance glanced at him. "Then we'll give them something to fear." The attack begins. Outside, the first wave of machines launched forward. They were fast, too fast for something that had been lifeless for centuries. Some were humanoid, sleek and deadly, while others resembled strange insect-like forms, crawling over the wreckage like spiders. "They're closing in," Ensign Rourke called from the helm. "Fire at will," Vance commanded. The Iron Resolve unleashed a storm of firepower. Blue energy beams streaked across space, ripping through the enemy ranks. The machines took hits, exploding into shards of metal. But for every one destroyed, more took its place. "They're adapting," Briggs muttered, watching the tactical display. "They're learning our attack patterns." Vance clenched his jaw. "Then we changed the rules." He turned to Rourke. "Full thrusters. Take us straight through the wreckage field." Rourke blinked. "Sir, that's..." "Do it." The Iron Resolve roared forward, weaving through the graveyard of ancient warships. The machines pursued, but the humans had one advantage: instinct. The machines moved with deadly efficiency, but they couldn't predict the unpredictable. The iron resolve spun, twisted, and dodged between floating debris, using the wreckage as cover. The machines fired plasma bursts, but their shots hit the ruined ships instead, causing massive explosions that blinded their sensors. Briggs grinned. "That's right. Keep up with that." A desperate plan. Inside the med bay, Caloris struggled to sit up as medical officers treated him and the other Velethi survivors. He turned to Dr. Hayes, the ship's chief medic. "Your people, they fight like no other," Caloris whispered. "No one else came for us. No one else would dare enter this place. But you did." Hayes gave him a reassuring nod. "That's what we do." Caloris looked at the screen displaying the battle outside. The machines were relentless. He knew they wouldn't stop, not unless something drastic was done. He grabbed Hayes's wrist. "I need to speak to your captain. Now." Moments later, Caloris was back on the bridge, standing beside Vance. "We cannot win like this," Caloris said urgently. "They will keep coming. But there is a way to stop them, at least for now." Vance glanced at him. "I'm listening." Caloris pointed to the wreckage of an enormous warship, its massive hull half buried in debris. "That ship was once the pride of our fleet. It carried the last of our superweapons. Its core is still intact, and it has enough energy left to create an EMP blast strong enough to disable the machines, for a time." Briggs looked at the readings. "He's right. If we overload that core, it'll fry anything electronic within a 100-kilometer radius. That includes those things. But it also includes us," Rourke pointed out. "We lose power too." Vance considered the risks. The iron resolve had backup systems, but if the EMP hit too hard, they'd be stranded. Still, it was their best shot. "How do we activate it?" he asked. Caloris hesitated. "It must be done manually. Someone has to go inside and set the overload sequence." A tense silence filled the bridge. Briggs took a deep breath. "I'll do it." Vance frowned. "Negative. We don't leave our own behind." Caloris stepped forward. "I will go." Vance shook his head. "You just got out of a death trap. You won't survive in there." Caloris gave him a sad smile. "I survived this long to finish what my people started. I will not let their deaths be in vain." Vance saw the determination in the alien's eyes. He wanted to refuse, but there was no time to argue. "Take Briggs with you," he finally said. "She'll make sure you get out." Caloris nodded. "Thank you, Deathworlder." The countdown. A small team launched toward the wrecked warship in a shuttle. Inside, the ship was crumbling, its corridors filled with broken machinery and drifting debris. The core chamber was deep inside, still pulsing faintly with energy. Caloris and Briggs worked quickly, activating the ancient controls. The sequence began. 5 minutes until detonation, Briggs said. Suddenly, the ship shook. The machines had noticed. They were coming. "Move," Briggs shouted. They ran back toward the shuttle, but the creatures were already inside the ship, crawling through the corridors. One leaped at Caloris, but Briggs shot it down. They reached the shuttle just in time. "Go! Go! Go!" As they blasted away, the countdown reached 0. A massive pulse of blue energy exploded from the warship. The waves swept through the battlefield, and the machines froze mid-motion. Their red eyes flickered, then went dark. On the Iron Resolve, systems briefly shut down before backup power kicked in. The ship held steady. "It worked," Rourke said, exhaling. Vance let out a breath of relief as the shuttle returned. Caloris stepped onto the bridge, exhausted but victorious. "It is done," he said. "But the machines, this was only a fraction of them. They will return." Vance nodded. "Then we'll be ready." The Deathworlders had answered the call, and they weren't finished yet. The battlefield was silent. The wreckage of ancient ships floated lifelessly in the cold void, and the machines that had once hunted the survivors were now frozen, disabled by the powerful EMP blast. On the Iron Resolve, Captain Ilias Vance watched the dark battlefield from the bridge. The machines had been stopped for now, but something about the eerie silence unsettled him. This was not the end. "They'll wake up again," Caloris said beside him, his silver-gray skin still pale from exhaustion. "The EMP only shut them down temporarily. It is not a permanent victory." Vance sighed. "I know. That's why we need to leave before they reboot." "Captain," Lieutenant Briggs called out from the sensor station, "I'm picking up something strange." Vance turned. "More machines." Briggs shook her head. "No, it's coming from one of the wrecked Velethi ships. There's a faint life sign." Caloris's eyes widened. "Impossible. We were the only survivors." Briggs looked uncertain. "I don't know what it is, but it's alive. Barely." Vance didn't hesitate. "Prep a shuttle. We're checking it out." A ghost ship. Minutes later, Vance, Briggs, and a small team of Marines boarded the shuttle and headed toward the ruined ship. The wreck was massive, its hull broken and torn apart by battle. It looked like a tomb. As they entered through a damaged airlock, their flashlights cut through the darkness. The walls were covered in burn marks and ancient skeletons. Velethi remains floated in the zero gravity. Caloris swallowed hard. "This was the Vulture, one of our last battleships. I never thought I would see it again." The team moved cautiously. There was no sound except the faint hum of their own breathing in their helmets. "Life sign is up ahead," Briggs said, checking her scanner. They followed her lead, pushing deeper into the ship. The corridors twisted in unnatural angles where the ship had broken apart. Finally, they reached a sealed stasis pod, its glass cracked, frost covering its surface. Inside, a Velethi lay motionless, their silver skin barely visible under layers of ice. Caloris rushed forward, wiping the frost away. His voice trembled. It's a child." Vance's eyes narrowed. "Can we wake them up?" Briggs hesitated. "The pod is too damaged. If we force it open, we might lose them." Caloris touched the glass gently. "We cannot leave them here." Vance nodded. "Then we do it carefully. Bring the pod back to the Iron Resolve." As they prepared to move, Briggs's scanner beeped again. She frowned. Captain, I'm detecting power surges all over the wreck." Vance's instincts flared. "Explain." Briggs swallowed. "I think the machines are waking up." The hunt begins. Alarms blared on the Iron Resolve. "Captain, this is Rourke." The ensign's voice crackled through the comms. "We're picking up multiple enemy signals. The machines are rebooting." Vance cursed. "How long do we have?" "Less than 5 minutes," Rourke replied. "And Captain, they're faster this time." Vance turned to his team. "Move. Now." They rushed back through the corridors, carrying the stasis pod carefully. But as they neared the airlock, a deep metallic sound echoed behind them. A dark shape emerged from the shadows. Its red eyes flickered to life. Then another, and another. The machines were waking up. Briggs raised her rifle. "We don't have time for this." Vance's jaw tightened. "Then we make time. Open fire." The team unleashed a barrage of gunfire. Bullets and plasma bolts tore through the first machine, sending it crashing to the floor. But the others kept coming, moving through the darkness like hunters in the night. "Go, go, go," Vance shouted. They sprinted down the corridor, the machines chasing them. One leaped forward, its clawed hand reaching for Caloris. Briggs spun, firing point blank. The machine's head exploded in a burst of sparks, but more took its place. They reached the airlock and sealed it behind them. The shuttle was waiting, its engines hot and ready. "Take off," Vance yelled as they leaped inside. The shuttle blasted away, escaping just as the wrecked ship shuddered, now fully infested with waking machines. Retreat to the Iron Resolve. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Rourke's face was tense. "Captain, we have incoming hostiles. They're swarming." The once dead machines now filled the battlefield. The EMP had only delayed them. Now, they were angry. Vance's shuttle raced toward the ship. The Iron Resolve's gunners opened fire, covering their escape. "Shields at 60%, Briggs called. "We can't take much more of this." Vance clenched his jaw. "Then we don't stay. Prepare for emergency warp." "But what about the battlefield?" Rourke asked. "There could be more survivors." Vance looked at Kelleris. The Velethi leader's face was full of grief, but he nodded. "There is no one left," Kelleris whispered. "Only the machines remain." Vance turned back to his crew. "Then we leave this cursed place behind. Engage warp." The engines roared to life. The Iron Resolve surged forward, stars stretching into lines as they jumped to safety. A new mission. Silence returned to the bridge. The crew exhaled in relief, but the weight of what they had seen remained. Kelleris stood beside the stasis pod, staring at the unconscious Velethi child inside. "They are the last of my people," he murmured. Vance placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Then we make sure they have a future." Briggs sighed. "But what about the machines? They're still out there." Vance's expression hardened. "Then we find a way to stop them. For good." The Iron Resolve had come to answer an SOS. Now it had a new mission, to end the machine threat before they awakened again. The Iron Resolve floated in the vastness of space, safe for now. The battle was behind them, but the danger was far from over. The crew worked in tense silence, their minds still haunted by the machines that had nearly destroyed them. Captain Elias Vance stood on the bridge, arms crossed, staring at the stasis pod that held the last Velethi child. The frost on the glass was slowly melting, revealing a small, delicate figure with silver-gray skin and faint blue markings. Beside him, Kelleris, the last surviving Velethi adult, watched in quiet sorrow. "They are the last of my kind," he whispered. "If they do not survive, my people will truly be gone." Dr. Hayes examined the pod's readings. "The stasis system is unstable. If we don't revive them soon, they won't make it." Vance nodded. "Do it. Bring them back. A new life awakens." The medical team carefully worked on the pod, adjusting the controls, regulating the temperature. Slowly, the child's breathing became steady, their small fingers twitching. Then, with a soft gasp, their eyes flickered open. Kelleris stepped forward, his voice gentle. "You are safe, little one." The child blinked, confused, their gaze darting around the unfamiliar surroundings. They tried to speak, but their voice was weak. Hayes placed a calming hand on Kelleris's shoulder. "They need rest. Let them adjust." Kelleris nodded, but his face remained tense. They should not have been alone. There should have been others. Vance studied him. "You think there might be more survivors?" Kelleris hesitated. "I do not know, but something does not feel right." The signal from the past. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Lieutenant Briggs frowned at her console. "Captain, I found something strange." Vance turned. "What is it?" Briggs tapped the screen, bringing up a weak distress signal. "It's old, centuries old, but it's still transmitting." Kelleris stepped forward, his face pale. "That is Velethi code." Vance exchanged a look with Briggs. "Are you saying someone sent a distress call, and it's still running?" Kelleris nodded. "If this signal is active, it means there might be others out there. Maybe more of my people." Vance made his decision instantly. "Set course for the signal source. We're going to find out." The Forgotten World. Hours later, the Iron Resolve arrived at the source of the signal, a dark, frozen planet. The surface was covered in endless snow and ice, with towering mountains stretching into the sky. Briggs ran a scan. "The signal is coming from underground. There's a hidden structure beneath the ice." Vance's instincts flared. Prepare a landing team. We're going in. Beneath the ice, Vance, Caloris, Briggs, and a small group of Marines stepped onto the icy surface, their breath misting in the freezing air. The wind howled around them, but the scanners led them to a deep crevasse, a crack in the ice that led downward. Using ropes and thrusters, they descended into the darkness. The deeper they went, the warmer it became. Strange. At the bottom, they found a massive metal door, covered in frost. Velethi symbols were carved into it. Caloris touched the markings, his voice trembling. This is a Velethi shelter. My ancestors must have built it to escape the war. Briggs scanned the structure. The signal is coming from inside. And I think there are life signs. Vance took a deep breath. Then let's open it. Caloris found an ancient control panel and entered a series of commands. With a deep rumble, the door slowly slid open, revealing a dark tunnel beyond. The team stepped inside, their lights flickering in the gloom. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in strange organic growths, like vines, but metallic. Briggs frowned. I don't like this. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the tunnel. A whispering voice. Vance raised his rifle. Who's there? A weak light flickered ahead, and a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a Velethi, but not like Caloris. This one was taller, thinner, with glowing blue veins running across their skin. Their eyes shimmered with a strange light. Caloris gasped. By the stars, you survived. The strange Velethi tilted their head, their voice hollow. You should not have come here. Vance narrowed his eyes. Why? The Velethi's expression darkened. Because the machines are already here. The trap. At that moment, alarms blared on the iron resolve. Captain. Rourke's voice crackled over the comms. Multiple enemy ships just appeared out of nowhere. They were hiding under the ice. Vance's blood ran cold. Briggs gritted her teeth. It's a trap. Suddenly, from the tunnels behind them, red eyes flickered to life. The machines had found them. Vance raised his weapon. Hold the line. We're getting out of here. Now. The shadows moved. The hunt had begun again. The darkness of the underground tunnels was broken by the eerie glow of red mechanical eyes. The machines had found them. Captain Elias Vance tightened his grip on his rifle. Beside him, Caloris stood frozen in shock, staring at the strange Velethi survivor who had just warned them. You said the machines are here, Vance said quickly. How many? The Velethi survivor's glowing eyes flickered. Too many. Briggs cursed under her breath. We don't have time to count. Captain, we need to move. From the tunnel behind them, metallic screeches echoed as the first of the machines crawled into view. Their twisted metal bodies gleamed in the dim light, their claws clicking against the ancient stone floor. Vance didn't hesitate. Opened fire, fighting through the storm. The tunnel erupted in gunfire and plasma blasts. Bullets tore through the first machine, sending it crashing to the floor. But more came, climbing the walls, crawling from the shadows. Briggs fired her rifle in controlled bursts, taking down 2 enemies in quick succession. They're faster than before. Caloris pulled the Velethi survivor behind cover. You survived here for centuries. Do you know another way out? The survivor hesitated, then nodded. There is an escape tunnel, but it is dangerous. Vance shot a machine through the chest, sending it sparking to the ground. Dangerous is better than dead. Lead the way. The survivor moved quickly, guiding them through the twisting tunnels. The machines followed, their metallic bodies crawling like spiders through the ancient ruins. Briggs glanced at her scanner. Captain, bad news. These tunnels are unstable. If we take a wrong turn, we could get buried alive. Vance grimaced. We don't have a choice. Keep moving. Above, the battle begins. On the Iron Resolve, alarms blared as enemy ships rose from beneath the ice. Shields up, Lieutenant Rourke shouted. We're under attack. The massive enemy ships, once hidden under the frozen surface, now unfolded like mechanical nightmares, their cannons charging with deadly energy. Commander Hayes clenched his fists. Return fire. Protect the landing team at all costs. The Iron Resolve's cannons roared to life, sending bolts of plasma through the sky. The enemy ships dodged with unnatural precision, returning fire with powerful blasts that shook the entire vessel. Rourke gritted his teeth. We can't hold them off forever. The captain needs to hurry. The escape tunnel. Deep underground, the team rushed through the ruins, dodging falling debris as the battle above sent tremors through the tunnels. The Velethi survivor led them to a massive sealed door, ancient symbols glowing faintly on its surface. Caloris pressed his hands against the symbols, whispering in his native language. With a low rumble, the door slowly opened, revealing a narrow tunnel leading upwards. "This will take us to the surface," the survivor said. Vance didn't waste time. "Move." The team rushed inside, but before they could close the door, the machines swarmed in from behind. Griggs turned and fired. "We need to hold them off." Vance threw a grenade, the explosion shaking the tunnel and sending debris crashing down. A few machines were crushed, but more kept coming. Caloris and the survivor ran ahead, carrying the Velethi child they had rescued earlier. Vance and Briggs covered their escape, firing relentlessly. Briggs shouted, "We can't hold them forever." Vance made a quick decision. "Then we don't try." He shot at a support beam near the tunnel entrance. The structure cracked, and with a final explosive shot, the ceiling collapsed, sealing the tunnel and burying the machines beneath tons of rock. Silence. Vance exhaled. That should slow them down. Briggs shook her head, catching her breath. "Let's hope so." Breaking through the enemy fleet, the team emerged on the surface, the freezing wind biting at their faces. Above them, the Iron Resolve was locked in a deadly battle, its shields flashing under enemy fire. Briggs tapped her comm. "Rourke, we're at the surface. Get us out of here." Rourke's voice came through the static. "We're coming, but the enemy ships are blocking our path." Vance looked up as the sky lit with plasma fire. The enemy wasn't letting them escape. Caloris turned to the survivor. "Is there anything in these ruins that can help us?" The survivor hesitated, then nodded. "There is an old defense system, but it has been inactive for centuries." Vance grabbed his shoulder. "Then let's wake it up." The ancient weapon. They rushed toward a stone control station built into the icy cliffs. The survivor pressed glowing runes, activating something deep beneath the ice. With a deep rumble, the ground shook. Suddenly, massive cannons hidden beneath the ice rose from the ground, their barrels glowing with ancient energy. The enemy ships turned, sensing the threat, but it was too late. The ancient Velethi cannons fired, sending massive energy beams ripping through the sky. One enemy ship was instantly torn in half. Another exploded in flames. The Iron Resolve seized the moment, charging through the chaos and descending toward the landing team. Rourke shouted, "Get aboard, now." Vance and his team sprinted toward the ship as the last enemy ship turned its guns on them. But before it could fire, boom! The final ancient cannon obliterated the enemy vessel. The Iron Resolve swooped in, its hangar doors open. The team jumped inside just as the ship pulled away, leaving the burning battlefield behind. The war is not over. On the bridge, Vance watched the icy world shrink on the view screen. The Velethi survivor stood beside him, looking at the stars. Caloris sighed. "We have found survivors, but my people's war is far from over." Vance nodded. "Then we'll fight it together." Briggs smirked. "Next time, let's pick a fight that doesn't involve ancient death machines." Vance chuckled. "Where's the fun in that?" As the Iron Resolve vanished into the stars, one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. The Iron Resolve soared through space, leaving the frozen battlefield behind. The crew had survived. For now. On the bridge, Captain Ilias Vance stood with arms crossed, watching the stars. Beside him, Kelleris and the Velethi survivor gazed at the screen. The rescued Velethi child slept peacefully in the medbay, safe at last. But no one felt relief. "We escaped," Briggs muttered, "but for how long?" The machines were still out there. The war wasn't over. Vance turned to his crew. "We need to finish this." A deadly pursuit. Alarms suddenly blared. "Captain." Rourke's voice crackled over the comms. "We've got incoming." On the view screen, a massive fleet of machine warships appeared, emerging from deep space. "They were waiting for us," Briggs growled. Kelleris's face darkened. "They won't stop hunting us." Vance's jaw tightened. "Then we stopped them first." The battle plan. The iron resolve was strong, but not against an entire fleet. Running wasn't an option. "We need to take out their leader," Vance said. "Without it, the fleet will lose coordination." Kelleris nodded. "Their command ship is always at the center, but it will be heavily guarded." Briggs smirked. "Good. I like a challenge." Vance turned to Rourke. "Prepare the ship. We're going in." A fight in the void. The iron resolve charged forward, weaving between enemy fire. The enemy warships unleashed plasma barrages, but the crew fought back with everything they had. "Shields at 50%, Rourke shouted. Briggs fired back, destroying 2 enemy fighters in quick succession. "We won't last long like this." Vance's gaze locked onto the command ship, a massive dark vessel, larger than anything they had faced before. "There," Kelleris pointed. "That is their mind. If we destroy it, the fleet will collapse." Vance nodded. "Then let's make sure it doesn't see another sunrise." A dangerous infiltration. The iron resolve blasted through the enemy lines, dodging fire until it reached the command ship. "Briggs, you're with me," Vance ordered. "Kelleris, you too. We're boarding that ship." With quick precision, the team launched in stealth pods, crashing into the enemy warship's hull. Inside, the hulls were cold, metallic, and eerily silent. The air smelled of rust and oil. "This place feels wrong," Briggs whispered. Kelleris shivered. "It is not just a machine. It is a mind." Vance led the way, weapons ready. "Then let's shut it down." The core of the enemy. Deeper inside, they found the control chamber, a vast, glowing room where the ship's central intelligence pulsed like a massive artificial brain. "The source of all their orders," Kelleris whispered. A deep mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "You should not have come." Suddenly, dozens of machine soldiers activated, stepping out of the shadows. Their red eyes gleamed, weapons raised. Vance raised his rifle. "Briggs, take the left. Kelleris, cover me." The room exploded into gunfire. Briggs dodged and fired, blasting machines apart with quick, precise shots. Kelleris used his energy weapon, cutting through the enemy ranks. Vance charged forward, heading for the central core. He dodged enemy fire, jumped over a fallen machine, and reached the glowing console. "How do we destroy it?" he shouted. Kelleris ran to his side, typing into the controls. "I can overload it, but it will take time." Briggs kicked a machine away, firing into another. "We don't have time." Vance pulled out a plasma charge. "Then let's do it the quick way." He slammed the charge onto the core. The system flashed red, alarms blaring. "That did it," Kelleris gasped. The machine voice echoed again. "You cannot stop us. We will return." Vance glared. "Not today." He pressed the detonator. Escape and victory. The entire ship shook as the core exploded. "Run," Briggs shouted. The team sprinted back to their pods, barely making it before the command ship erupted into flames. As they launched back toward the Iron Resolve, the remaining enemy ships suddenly stopped moving. "They're shutting down," Rourke cheered over the comms. "The fleet is collapsing." Kelleris watched in awe. "It worked. We won." Vance leaned back in his seat, finally allowing himself to breathe. "Let's go home. A new beginning." With the enemy fleet destroyed, the Iron Resolve set course for safer space. Kelleris stood beside Vance, watching the stars. "My people still need a home," he said softly. Vance nodded. "We'll help you find one." Briggs stretched. "And next time, let's take on something easier. Maybe pirates, or a big asteroid." Vance chuckled. "No promises." As the Iron Resolve vanished into the stars, one thing was certain. Humanity had answered the call, and they had won.